Today I'm feeling a little bit retro, in the mood to reminisce a little bit. So I wanted to go back and talk about a great period in my childhood, and that is the era of the Game Boy, the Game Boy Color. I kind of clubbed them in together because, the Color, of course, could play original Game Boy games, and they kind of went hand in hand. But I've pulled off all my old Game Boy stuff, off the shelf, out of the storage, collected it here, and I've put together my collection, my childhood collection. So all the games I actually had, owned, and played as a kid growing up, throughout the 90s, early 2000s. And I wanted to go through those games. So again, all these games that I'm going to show today, I had growing up, I played. None of these I picked up later on in life. And I do have other games, a bunch of other Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games that I picked up later on in life. But this is the original stash, let's say. So let's start by taking a look at the Game Boy Color. And if you grew up in this era, you know there was a lot of different colors for the Game Boy Color, and that was one of the cool things about it, all the different colors. It really stood out, really caught your eye, really made you want to get one of these. And I don't think I ever picked this one out myself. This was gifted from my parents, but I got the purple, the atomic purple, I guess, the translucent purple. So let's pull this out here and take a look. But let's take a look at the back actually first. Pretty awesome. We got Zelda and Wario on the back there. So that's pretty cool. But let's open this up. Let me show you my original Game Boy that's managed to survive somehow all these years. So this is it right here. It's kind of beat up, not gonna lie. I'm not sure if this is gonna focus on there. I'll try. So screen's a bit beat up, and unfortunately, I am missing the back case here for the batteries. Common problem with the Game Boy. Still remember when that broke off. But I do know this still works despite its flaws, and just a lot of good times on this. And I think what I remember the most about the Game Boy Color, well, of course, being able to take it around, right? It was such a game changer to be able to play games, in the car where your family or your parents are driving somewhere, but also being able to play in the house. And what was crazy about this time was that the Game Boy Colors, it had no backlight. And people today, they complain about frame rates and small issues in games, things like that. But when you grew up playing something like this without a backlight, very limited with what the hardware could do, you kind of appreciate everything you get. You don't complain too much about those little nitpicks that you see now in modern console gaming. But I remember playing this thing a lot, even trying to play it at night. And eventually, I had to get that worm light, if you remember, that connects into the side. So you can actually see what's going on in the screen because you really couldn't see much if it was bright out on this thing because it didn't have the backlight. But Game Boy Color, that was awesome. A lot of memories playing this. Let's get into some games. And I got some good games to go through. I got some loose games, I got some box games. But I want to talk about this right here where my loose games are stashed. So this is my Game Boy case. This thing's old. I don't know how old, but it's from that era. And this was an awesome case. This is how I carried my Game Boy around, all my games. All the loose games are still in here. And then, of course, I've got some box games off on the side we're going to get through as well. But let's pull these out. Let's go through them one by one. I probably have like maybe a dozen games to go through and talk about. So I had about a dozen games growing up and some good ones. And before we go to the games, I also want to say one thing. I grew up, I had a Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, didn't have many games for those, but I was terrible as a kid picking out games for those consoles because I would mostly pick out games by the characters I knew. So, for example, like I'd go to the store, I'd see Garfield. I bought Garfield on the Sega Genesis. Not a terrible game, but not a great game. But I picked out a lot of duds on those consoles. But somehow I was able to have a good streak, pick out a lot of good games for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So I'm happy about that. But let's start off. First game right out of the case here. And that is Battletoads, a banger. Great game. I never had Battletoads on any other console. Did rent it, but I had Battletoads on the Game Boy here. And let me tell you, this was a great version. Tons of beat 'em up fun. Still a hard game. It wasn't easy. I don't think I ever beat it as a kid, But Battletoads, like this is a must-have on the Game Boy, I would say. It's a really good game. You know, it's limited by what the Game Boy, of course, could do, but an absolute classic. Tons of fun. Beat 'em up fun, good bosses. You know, you're riding around on vehicles, different things going on there. And just really happy. I really enjoyed Battletoads. That was one that I went back to, played a lot and a lot. So Battletoads, awesome game. Another banger here. The original Pokemon Red here. And I don't know when I came to acquire this because I really grew up with Pokemon Blue and I've still got Pokemon Blue. We're going to talk about that more later. But at some point, I've picked up a red. I think it might have been my brothers or sisters. I don't know because I don't know why I would have both. Blue was the Pokemon I really grew up with and played. We'll talk more about Pokemon when we come to Pokemon Blue, but do have a red here, which is cool. All right, this is a weird one. How do we even say this? Hyanki Alien. And this one here, I played a lot and I went back and played it again for this video. It's not a great game. Basically, you dig holes, the aliens fall in the holes, and then you bury them and kill them. And that's how you kind of beat the level, let's say. Very simplistic game. Kind of fun, but not that fun. Very repetitive. But when you only have a handful of games growing up, you learn to love them, you play them a lot. And I do remember playing this game a lot. Cheap game, wouldn't really recommend it, but it's okay for what it is. Just a very kind of novelty game. Hyanki Alien. All right, this is an interesting one here. Harvest Moon 2. And I remember buying this. This was a Game Boy Color game, I believe. But I remember buying this and I just could not get into it. I don't know why. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I think at that time, probably didn't read the manual and didn't look anything up on this game. But I remember buying it, playing it for a while, and just not being able to figure it out. So I can't even say if it's a good or bad game because I barely got into it. Like I don't even think I planted a crop in this game. So kind of a shame. I didn't really give it its fair chance, but I think my childhood mind just couldn't figure out Harvest Moon 2. Let me know in the comments below if this is a good game or not, if you ever played this one. All right, three more loose ones to go through. And let's start with this one here. In its case, this was a good one. Let me open this up. So here we have Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. And this is actually maybe the first JRPG I played. And it was pretty cool because you got two games in one here, Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, or Dragon Quest 1 and 2, as you may know. And what was interesting about this one is I remember buying this, I remember going to the store. And again, like I said before, I picked games out by the cover art or by characters I knew. And this one was picked out by the cover art because growing up as a kid, there were two kind of themes I was fascinated with. One was like ninjas, ninja theme, and the other was knights and castles. So this one, of course, on the cover had sort of knights and castles, those brick stone walls. And I remember being drawn to it, picking it up, and I played this a lot as a kid as well. Don't think I ever beat the games. I think I ended up just kind of getting lost in the world, not sure where to go next. But this really taught me the basics of RPGs, JRPGs, turn-based combat, you know, grinding, going through different towns. It really kind of sparked my imagination. And really glad I had this one because, you know, Dragon Warrior as well is kind of the start of JRPGs in general. I know were some before that, but this really set it off. So to have this on the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, I think this was Game Boy Color as well. It was just awesome to have. So played this one a lot. And now of course we got the remakes, the 2D HD remake of this again, which is awesome as well. So would recommend that if you haven't played it. But Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, that was a good pick. Good childhood pick. And we're going to another good childhood pick here. This one also was awesome. And this is why I'm saying I was really good at picking out Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Because here we got Metal Gear Solid. And this as well was a great game on the Game Boy. Tons of memories playing this. But what I remember most was getting the missile launcher. I think it might have been called the Nikita, and you fire the missile and then you steer it, and you had to steer it through the level. And I just remember having so much fun with that, thinking it was awesome. Metal Gear Solid, of course, iconic series. I really need to talk more about it because it's probably one of my favorite series of all times. I love the original, well, not the original. I love the first game on the PlayStation 1. But the Game Boy game here, this was awesome. Still fun. Definitely give it a try if you've never played it. Tactical, espionage, action, Metal Gear Solid. And I think this one goes for a pretty penny now. It's a little bit expensive to buy. But that was a good pick. All right, the last loose game before we get to the good box game. Save the best for last. That one right here, Donkey Kong Land 3. So never had 1 or 2 on the Game Boy. Did have Donkey Kong Land 3. And this was an awesome game. I don't think it was necessarily the best of the trilogy, but it was the one I had. But let's be real, you really couldn't go wrong with a Donkey Kong game on the Game Boy. Just so fun, platformer. I guess it's really the only platformer that I had now that I'm thinking about it, on the Game Boy at least. Um, so this was the platformer I had. I didn't have any of the Super Mario Game Boy games, anything like that. So Donkey Kong Land 3, this was the one for me. Played through it multiple times. A game that I could actually get through as a kid. A lot of these games I couldn't even get to the end, but Donkey Kong, that was one I went through multiple times. Platforming, having a lot of fun. Played great. Doesn't look super great again because it's limited to the hardware, but the play is still really good. The feel, the control, the movement, the combat action, everything about Donkey Kong Land 3 was really good. All right, now let's get to the box games here. And I got 4 games that somehow managed to survive with their boxes, with their manuals complete. And these were all good games as well. So let's just start with the first one here, and that is Crystallis. And I remember picking this one up as well. And again, picked it up just because of the cover art. So take a look at that. Awesome cover art. This is, I believe, a port of the NES game. Never had the NES game, but I had this one here. And Crystallis was an awesome game. Action, adventure, RPG game, kind of similar playstyle to Zelda. You could go, get new weapons, get magic, attack enemies, not turn based, so action combat. Just really fun. This one was a really good buy. Really glad I had this one. This was one of the best games I had on the Game Boy. Crystallis, awesome RPG. Highly recommend this if you're into these kind of, collecting for Game Boy Color, or if you just want to play it, emulate it. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what's better, the NES or the Game Boy version, but this is just a port of that. And, this is awesome. Crystallis. Always was happy to have Crystallis. Happy to pick that one out. All right, let's bring it back now to Pokemon. So we talked about Red, but this was the Pokemon for me. I was a Pokemon Blue guy, and man, this game was awesome. This game was awesome. Huge fad, huge craze in the 90s, right? If you had this, everybody had it in school. And just starting off in the town, picking your first Pokemon of the 3. Just so many memories here, training, collecting, being on the schoolyard, finding out secrets, finding out, where you could find certain Pokemon in the world. Eventually getting to the point where different students would bring the link cables and you could trade Pokemon. And then we got into the cards. So that's a whole nother topic. But what's crazy as well is like this is where Pokemon started for me, but this is also where Pokemon ended. Well, at least on the Game Boy, right? I got the red. I also had the yellow at some point, but I never took it beyond Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow. I mean, I got into some of the side games like Pokemon Snap on the N64, but that was it. Never took it back to a mainline Pokemon to this day. And that's kind of weird because I loved this game so much. It was so much fun. But this as well is, I guess, first edition print or something like that. I remember looking it up. There's some tells on the back to know if it's like a first print based on the screenshots on the back and some of the text, but I don't know what that means exactly. I think it's worth a little bit more, but it's not really about that anyways. But Pokemon Blue, really glad this one survived. Just a memory of my childhood. Pokemon Blue, so great game. Still remember trying to collect them all. But maybe I need to get back into Pokemon one day. Give another Pokemon a try. Okay, we'll do this one. We'll save maybe possibly the very best for last. So this is second last. Still remember picking this one up. That is Wild Snake. And Wild Snake is a game Like these are the type of games you really wanted on the Game Boy because you kind of got that unlimited replayability, right? Games like Tetris, puzzle games, that kind of thing. And this was created by the creator of Tetris. And what it is kind of like it's basically Tetris with snakes. So the snakes come down, the snakes fall instead of the blocks. But what's different is the snakes aren't in fixed position. So as they kind of come down and hit the ground or hit other snakes, they conform to the shape beneath them. But the snakes have different kind of colors or looks, and same idea. You just got to stack them, connect them to kind of bring it down. But Wild Snake was a fun game, tons of replayability there. I remember picking this one up, and this is kind of one of those days where you're with your parents, you're trying to get a new game, and you can't always get a new game, a great game. So you got to go into the bargain bin so you can persuade them to get you anything. And you can see right here, this one was 9.97, marked down from 29.99 to 19.99, all the way down to 9.97. And I said, "Hey, I'll take it. Give me anything I can get." And this is still a fun game. You can play this just like Tetris. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, not as good as Tetris, but hey, it's the next best thing. And last game here to talk about. Absolute classic. And so happy that this one survived with the box because as we saw, a lot of my games didn't survive with the box. But here, Zelda Oracle of Seasons. So if you recall, this game came out in a pair, kind of like Pokemon Blue and Red. We had Zelda Oracle of Seasons and we had Zelda Oracle of Ages. And I had to make a choice. I didn't know anything about them, what was which was better. Didn't have, really the internet telling me anything, no magazines. So I went with the red. I don't know why. Couldn't tell ya, but I was happy with my choice because this is an awesome game. And I feel like of all the Zelda games, these two, Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, are probably the most slept on, right? People talk about the Minish Cap. Everybody knows about the original NES and the Super Nintendo games and, you know, all the other great Zeldas. But Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, these are up there. These are really good games. And what was kind of cool about these ones was like you had different items, different weapons you don't usually see in other Zelda games, like different rings. There was kind of a ring system in this. The world looked awesome. You had, like snowy areas, desert areas. It was just a really well put together Zelda game. And I was really happy to have this. Tons of fun. Highly recommend it. To this day, I never played the other one, the blue one, Oracle of Ages. I really should. Probably doing myself a disservice. But this was a great game. And again, highly recommended. Tons of fun. Great game to end on. So that was my original Game Boy Color collection I grew up with. So as you can see, I had a lot of great games. Made a lot of good picks for the Game Boy Color as a child. But I am missing a few that I just lost over time. So I did have Zelda, the DX version on the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, I guess. And that was an awesome game. I don't know how I lost that. Ended up getting the remake on the Switch, but yeah, that was an absolute banger as well. So a few games I've lost over the years, unfortunately. But that's it. Just wanted to come on, do a little reminiscing, talk about the old Game Boy Color days, share my collection with you. Glad these have survived. I don't know how they have, to be honest, but the Game Boy Color, was just such a good time. My first handheld, and I think that's partly why I really like the Nintendo Switch or the Switch 2 now is because growing up with the Game Boy, like the Switch 2 is just the ultimate version of this, right? Just so much better in every way. But this is where it started, and we'll never forget that time period. So that's all. Wanted to reminisce, and if you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share some love. Share your comments below. What games or Game Boy Color games did you have growing up? What were your favorite games? I'd love to hear it. And that's it. Have a good day.